Fluoride Safety Training 2020. I am Nicole Baser, and thank you all for joining us. Welcome this morning. I just want to thank you all. Thank you to Ying Ying, Randy, and Jeff for sparing some time for us to give us this training. I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. I will not be sharing my video camera with you all today the whole time. I just wanted to pop on and say hi so you guys know that I am here. So if you have any technical difficulties, please shoot me a text or shoot me a chat in this chat box here. I'm here to help out, and I do have another assistant here, Allie. She's not going to show her video camera, but she is here to help out, so we can help out if you guys are having some technical difficulties. We will try and make this as seamless as possible because we do know things are a little crazy. We appreciate you adjusting your schedules. Things are different with COVID, and we appreciate you guys being operators and keeping our water safe. We're here to keep you in your compliance with your state agencies and your county agencies with this training and keeping your CEU credits. You start off today with Randy Olson. He's the Environmental Health Bureau Manager with the Davis County Health Department. He's going to be doing some rules and regulations. Then we are going to have Jeff Benton, the Safety Manager with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. He's going to talk about chemical safety. And then Ying Ying McCauley, the Assistant Director with the Utah Division of Drinking Water, is going to talk about lessons learned. Our first speaker is Randy Olson, and we are now going to turn the time over to Randy to present his presentation.
All right, happy to be here today. I'm going to cover the regulations for Davis and Salt Lake counties. I'm going to share my screen here, my presentation. And get up and running. Okay, so as I was introduced, I work for Davis County Health Department. I've been here for 3 years. I am the Water Resources Bureau Manager, so I oversee all of the water quality programs for Davis County. So that includes our, swimming pools, streams and ponds, wastewater, drinking water, and fluoride, and a few other programs. So I kind of have oversight over those things, and am able to be involved in fluoride. Jeff Hicken is over the fluoridation program for the Salt Lake County Health Department. He's unable to participate today, so I'm going to present both of our parts. So I'll talk about both Davis County regulations as well as Salt Lake's. Sorry, I have a little trouble here. Okay, there we go. So today I'm going to cover a little bit about the history of fluoridation in these two counties and kind of an overview of the regulations. We're going to talk about changes that have happened to the two regulations most recently. We're going to talk about the fluoride levels that are defined, what's required under those two regulations. We're going to talk about reporting and monitoring requirements. We're going to talk about the other rules that apply to fluoridation in Utah. And then we'll talk about the training requirements. We're going to go over what's considered overfeeds and underfeeds and what is required when those happen within water systems. And also going to talk a little bit about operator safety and what's contained in our regulations pertaining to that. So a little history. Back in November 2000 was the first time that fluoridation was approved by Salt Lake and Davis County residents, went to a vote and was approved by both counties. And in January of the next year, a committee was established to draft regulations for those two counties that involved the county health departments, water systems, and also the Division of Drinking Water. So they were hammered out some regulations. Davis County's regulation for fluoridation went into effect in September of 2001. It has since been revised multiple times, including this year. And then Salt Lake County's regulation went into effect the next year, October 2002, and it has been revised several times as well. Davis County's fluoridation went to vote again in November 2004 and was again approved. There is one city in Davis County that opted out of having fluoride, but the rest within Davis County have fluoridation. So there's one city, one system that does not fluoridate, but the rest do. So the main purpose of these regulations is to define and set the level of fluoride that is both safe and effective. So we define what levels the water systems should be obtaining, should be achieving for fluoridation for their systems. So the CDC recommends a range of 0.6 to 1 milligrams and with a target of 0.7 milligrams per liter. So Davis County's annual control range, so the average over a whole year, we say needs to fall within 0.6 milligrams per liter to 0.8 milligrams per liter, with the optimal fluoride level being 0.7 milligrams per liter. So that 0.7 is the target number. That's what the system should be trying to achieve, but there is a buffer of 0.6 to 0.8 for the annual average. Salt Lake County is similar with a little bit wider range for their annual, well, actually just for their operational range. So they say that 0.6 to 1.0 is the range that's okay during operation, and then their optimal fluoride level is 0.7 milligrams per liter, which is the same as ours. So that is the same for both counties. So as I mentioned, our regulation Davis County was recently updated. It was being revised late last year, and then those revisions were approved by our Board of Health in February of this year. There wasn't many major changes, it was mostly minor. We clarified some definitions. We adjusted the training requirements a little bit, which I'll cover here in a little while. We updated our overfeed table, and we added a underfeed table, which we did not have previously. And we also added an enforcement section. That wasn't out of like a need that we saw, just we want to be consistent with our other regulations that have enforcement sections, and this regulation did not. So we just added that to be consistent. And I'll cover some of these changes we made as we go on. Salt Lake County's regulation was last revised and approved in February of last year, 2019. They also clarified some of the definitions, updated some of the requirements for monitoring, reporting, training. They made it clear that fluoride overfeeds begin at 1 milligram per liter, and then removed some language about what needed to be supplied to the health department. They also, part of clarifying what needed to be reported to them was because of some issues that they had seen. So they decided to ask all fluoridating districts to send them some additional information. So they require that the fluoride districts send batch certificates of analysis, their current sampling plan, SOPs, number of connections, EOPs, and that they can identify all the fluoridation facilities also within their system and report those to the county. They did this they wanted to make sure that everyone had a good sampling plan, but also they wanted to look at everyone's EOPs and SOPs and processes in order to help the systems update them and identify any changes that should be made or could be made to make sure that things were operating smoothly. So first question, in what year did Salt Lake and Davis County residents first vote in favor of water fluoridation?
Okay, so I am going to launch this poll, and I know a few of you are having some technical difficulties, and don't worry, we have plenty of polls that are coming up, so just continue to plug through this, but I'm gonna launch this poll for the rest of you to participate in. Go ahead and plug in your answer. In what year did Salt Lake and Davis County residents first vote in favor of water fluoridation? Plug in your answer. Is it A, 1999, B, 2000, C, 2001, or D, 2002? and we've only got 12% of you who have voted. So again, let's have you guys jump in here and participate in this poll if you can. In what year did Salt Lake and Davis County residents first vote in favor of water fluoridation? Is it A, 1999, B, 2000, C, 2001, or D, 2002? I'll give you guys a few more seconds to try and vote here. We will have a couple more chances to participate, and if you guys don't have a poll or anything, try and put your answer in the chat or some way that you can participate. It will record your chat and everything. I'm going to close it on up here and share those results for those who were able to participate. And for those who were able to participate, it said 19% of you said 1999, 58% said 2000, and 17% said 2001, and 8% said 2002. So I'm now going to hide those results so that you can have it back again.
All right, so looks like most of you got that correct. The answer was 2000. So fluoridation has been approved since 2000. It actually started later than that. I'm not sure the exact dates that systems actually had fluoridation online, but the actual vote occurred in 2000. All right, moving on. So powers and duties of local health departments. What is our role as a local health department? So we are responsible to make sure that fluoride levels are maintained at safe levels within the water systems within our counties. Obviously, the systems are first required to do that, and then the county has oversight over the county as a whole to make sure that the citizens are not being exposed to harmful levels of fluoride, but also that they're getting enough fluoride to have the health benefits. So we require that annual fluoride averages be within the optimal control range to achieve that goal. We require monthly submission of fluoride reports to us by the 15th of by the following month. So for May's numbers, we'd require that by June 15th, we have those numbers reported to us so we can do our surveillance. We, as it says, provide fluoride surveillance. We review all the data regularly and also do an annual report, and we go back and look and see and make sure that all the systems are within the ranges they should be. We also collect the split samples, or we receive split samples from the systems and compare them to our analysis to make sure that your testing equipment is effective and accurate. And then we also do our own investigative sampling. So we have our sampler that will go out and take samples from each of the systems, and we do our own testing to make sure that we're getting similar results to you guys and that the public is getting what they are supposed to. So some of the more specific requirements for Davis County, we require that calculated dose be recorded daily, and that's usually going to be, for most of you, I think that's kind of done through your SCADA. We also expect that sampling be done at each point within the distribution system weekly. So if you have a bunch of different representative points within your system, every one of those should be sampled weekly. And it used to say, this is one of the changes we made, it used to be read that you had to do that daily. So we changed that. So now, you can go to representative points A and B on Monday, C and D on Tuesday, so on and so forth, so long as you can get through all the representative points each week, so that you know each week what's going on in each area within the distribution system. And then we also require that you submit a monthly split sample. So you bring us 2 samples, or one that you've tested and one that we will test, and we do our certified analysis to make sure that we're getting the same or similar results to your testing equipment. And then reporting, we require that your results from your fluoride monitoring that be submitted to us with the address of the sampling points. And we also require that the dosage numbers be submitted to us monthly as part of those monthly reports that are due by the 15th of the following month. Salt Lake County is pretty similar. Water systems are required to take weekly samples. daily if you use an online analyzer that does it automatically. Compliance is determined by taking the annual average of the monthly field test results. So that's similar to us. We'll take the monthly averages and come up with an annual average that needs to be within that control range. And then Salt Lake also will make sure that split sample results and calculated dose are supporting the validity of the field test results. So monitoring and reporting, kind of talked about some of this already, but monthly sample reports are due by the 15th of each month for the previous month. The target should be 0.7 milligrams per liter. And the one thing that everyone needs to remember is you need to consider natural fluoride levels as well when you're dosing. So this also needs to be on the report showing what the natural fluoride level is, what was added, and then what is the final fluoride level. And then, like we already mentioned, the annual control range for Davis County should be between 0.6 and 0.8, and for Salt Lake, 0.6, 0.9. So that's that annual average. So we are not the only ones, the local health departments are not the only ones that have authority over fluoridation. The Division of Drinking Water does all the approvals for plan reviews, for the installation or change of equipment, and also they have oversight over the chemicals that are added and the suppliers that supply those chemicals. So they are the ones that oversee that, whereas the health departments are more on the monitoring side. And the division is not only involved in the initial installation, but they will review, they'll do an inspection of your equipment, go through all your equipment every 3 years as part of your sanitary survey, which are usually done in conjunction with local health departments. And then they also monitor, they don't monitor regularly, but they are involved anytime there is an exceedance of 4 milligrams per liter. And they also oversee parts of the Safe Drinking Water Disclosure Act. So the Safe Drinking Water Disclosure Act came into effect in July of 2013. It requires water systems to obtain information from fluoride manufacturers. So the systems are required to get the certificates of analyses with the Utah 9 showing levels of certain chemicals within the fluoride chemicals. And then the systems are required under this act to hold on to those certificates analyses and be able to provide them to the public upon request. The health department has certain responsibilities under this act as well. We're required to keep copies of documents from the fluoride chemical providers showing that their chemicals are NSF ANSI certified. And then also we were supposed to verify the certificates analysis that you guys receive at your systems to make sure that they are adequate. Usually we just do this as part of sanitary surveys or routine fluoride visits or discussions. And if you want more information on that act, you can find that on the division's website. So as mentioned, these certificates analyses are what the systems are required to maintain. So as you receive new shipments of fluoride chemicals, whatever chemicals you may use, you need to receive these certificates analyses that show the breakdown of these Utah 9 and their levels within the product. And you need to hold on to those and be able to provide them to the public as requested and to the health department as requested. All right, so this brings me to my next question. I've hopefully pounded this into your heads by now, but what is the optimal fluoride level in both Salt Lake and Davis counties, the target fluoride level?
Okay, and if you guys are having trouble participating in your polls on your computer, it's probably because of security settings. And so please type your answers in the chat box or the questions box if you're unable to participate in the polls, and it will record your answers and show that you are participating. So I will launch this poll. what is the optimal fluoride level in both Salt Lake and Davis County? And of course, you guys are all paying attention to Randy, so you guys know this, right? So go ahead and either type in your answer, click it. It will not give you a button to submit it. It does just automatically recognize what people are selecting. So go ahead and click your answer, A, B, C, D, or type it into the chat. What is the optimal fluoride level in both Salt Lake and Davis counties? A 0.5, B 0.6, C 0.7, or D 0.8. And it looks like most of you have voted, so we are going to close it on up and share it. And it says 95% of you said C 0.7 and only 5% of you said A 0.5. There you go, Randy.
Okay, great work for 95% of you. 0.7 is that target number for both Davis and Weber counties, or sorry, Davis and Salt Lake counties, which is also the number that is recommended by the CDC. Okay, moving on. So training requirements. We do require in both regulations that operators working with fluoride be trained properly, that they receive regular fluoride safety training for your own protection and for protection of the public that you serve. So for new operators, Salt Lake County requires that new operators obtain 6 hours of fluoridation training. And then in Davis County, this is one of the changes we made to our regulation this year. Ours used to require 6 hours of initial training. We have now changed that to 3 hours. So new employees, new operators need 3 hours of training within 6 months of the job assignment, while Salt Lake County requires 6 hours. After the initial training, all operators are now required to be trained, have 3 hours of training every other year, biannual training for both Salt Lake and Davis counties. That was another change we kind of made in our regulation. I believe that we only were requiring at least one person to receive that regular training. We're now requiring that all operators that are involved with fluoridation receive 3-hour biannual refresher training in Davis County, and then Salt Lake requires the same. Another thing we changed in Davis County, we were requiring in our regulation that those records, the records of the training for your operators, be submitted to us. We're now just saying that you need to hold on to those records yourselves, maintain them yourselves, and then we will check them as we do sanitary surveys and as we do other fluoride related visits. Salt Lake County is the same. They also just want you to hold on to your training records for your operators, and they'll verify them however they choose to do so. And then also, this is an approved training for that 3-hour biannual training for Davis County, and it would be approved training for Salt Lake County's hours as well, whether it be the initial training or the biannual training. But if you choose to go outside of these trainings that we're participating in to get fluoride training, that may be approved. You just need to verify with the local health department, Davis or Salt Lake, to make sure that we approve of those trainings before you take them, if you want them to count towards your 3 hours of or 6 hours of training. So just make sure you run those past us. All right, so underfeeds, this was something that I already mentioned. We made some changes to this. We added a table to our regulation that clarifies what is an underfeed and what the systems need to do when there is an underfeed. So an underfeed would be defined as fluoride levels below 0.5 milligrams per liter. For water systems that experience this for less than 2 consecutive weeks, they're expected to determine if there's malfunction, make any repairs, and dosage adjustments as necessary. If it's for less than 2 weeks, there's no need to report to the local health department. As long as you can get it back online, there's no need to report to us. And you would just keep your system up and running and just make those adjustments. If it goes beyond 2 weeks, up to 6 months, you will need to notify the department within 3 weeks of the first day of the underfeed. So if you go beyond 2 weeks, you have 1 week within that you must update the health department of the underfeed. And then beyond that, you would also need to submit an action plan to the department showing what the plan is to correct the issue and when you hope to get things back online. If an underfeed goes for longer than 6 months, you will have to meet with the local health department, Davis County Health Department here, and just make sure that we are all on the same page. And we would sit down and hammer out an action plan that would be approved by the department that the system would then have to follow through with.
Hey,
For
Randy,
solid, yes.
how long do they need to keep a hold of their records?
That's a good question. I don't know that we say in our regulation if there's a actual time frame they need to hold on to those. Which ones are you referring to? Just the like certificates analyses or?
Let me see if they specify that and we can come back to it.
Okay. I'll move on if you can interrupt me later if they specify.
I will.
Okay. So Salt Lake County, if you have an underfeed for less than 3 weeks, they don't require any action. If it goes beyond 3 weeks, up to 3 months, you would need to notify the Salt Lake County Health Department, submit an action plan with corrective actions and dates, and then you would have to update the department monthly for the duration of the underfeed and keep them up to date on what's going on and what you're doing to fix the situation. If it goes beyond 3 months, up to 6 months, the systems would need to meet with the health department, review the action plan and the corrective actions. If it goes beyond 6 months, the Salt Lake County Health Department may issue a notice of violation and additional action could be taken by the health department. And then they would require that you notify healthcare professionals and the public. Moving on to overfeeds. So we updated our table to clarify what needs to be done at different levels of overfeeds and made it clear what is considered an overfeed. So fluoride levels above 1.0 milligrams per liter in Davis County is considered an overfeed. For overfeeds between 1.0 and 2.0, systems are expected to leave the system on, determine what the malfunction is, make any repairs and dosage adjustments as needed, and then there is no need to notify the health department in this range. So up to 2 milligrams per liter, you do not need to notify the health department. Should keep fluoridating and just adjust and make the fixes as needed. If it goes above 2.1 milligrams per liter up to 4.0 milligrams per liter, again, you're going to leave the fluoridation system on. You're going to look for the issue and make repairs. And then you do need to notify the department at this point. So if it goes up above 2 to 2.1 and higher, you will need to notify the health department. And then also at this point, you will need to comply with the requirements of the EPA and the DDW for notification. And you can find what you need to do there in the R309-220 monitoring and water quality rule, public notification requirements. So there's a section in that rule that tells you exactly what you need to notify or what you need to say. It gives you instructions on notifying the public and it actually spells out what needs to be said in those notifications. So that's for that 2.1 to 4.0 milligram per liter range.
Hey, Randy.
Yes.
It was the certificate of analysis they were more specifically wondering how long they needed to hold on to.
So that is a question that I would have to go to the rule to answer. It wouldn't be in our regulations since it's that Safe Drinking Water Disclosure Act that mandates that certificates of analyses be held. So I don't know that off the top of my head. I can look that up later and maybe get that answer to you. But also, if anyone wants to look that up, you just need to go look up that rule. You can go to the division's website. Also, they have some information on that.
And then real quickly while I got you, can the public notifications be done in annual CCRs?
For an overfeed of 2.1 to 4.0, I would say I believe so. It just has to be within 12 months of the overfeed. So I don't know that we specify how that has to be done. But again, you would need to refer to that rule, the state rule for public notification, to get the exact requirements. And I'm not as familiar with that.
Thank you.
Yep. So continuing with our overfeed table in Davis County, if you then go above 4.1 milligrams per liter up to 10, you would need to immediately turn off your fluoride system, determine any malfunctions and make repairs. You will need to notify the department within 24 hours if this occurs. So if you go up above 4, you need to notify us as soon as possible within 24 hours. And then obviously you're going to be taking water samples throughout this distribution system, and you will continue to do so until the levels drop below 1.0 milligrams per liter again. You also will need to measure pH to determine corrosivity of the water. And then when everything's back together where it should be, notify us when fluoridation is going to resume. And then again, comply with the requirements of the EPA and DDW for reporting to the public. And then the last level on our overfeed table, if levels go above 10.1 milligrams per liter, again, you're going to turn off your fluoridation system immediately. You're going to notify the department as soon as possible and Division of Drinking Water immediately. You will flush out all the water lines that contain levels that high. So that'll be a high priority. Obviously, you're going to be notifying the public as soon as possible to prevent consumption of that water with high fluoride levels or heavy metals potentially. Obviously, you're going to be looking for malfunctions and issues and be looking to fix the problems. You'll be sampling until levels are back to normal, measuring pH again to determine corrosivity, and then obtaining approval from the department and division prior to resuming fluoridation. So we will make sure with the division everything's back online before you are allowed to fluoridate again. And then again, you're going to have to comply with the reporting requirements of the EPA and the division. So for Salt Lake County, overfeeds 1.0 to 2.0, you're going to leave the system on, determine malfunction, make repairs, no notification necessary. So pretty much the same as Davis County in that 1.0, 2.0. And I would just reemphasize that at this range, you do not need to turn off your system and you do not need to notify the health departments. You can call us if you are looking for assistance or some guidance or help. We're happy to help, but I know in the past we've had some systems panic when they've got a 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, and there just is not a need to do that. You just need to make those corrections and keep your fluoridation system going and just get things resolved that way. For Salt Lake County, if you go above 2.0, again, you're going to leave the system on, find the malfunction, make the repair, and then notify the Salt Lake Health Department within 7 days. So similar to Davis County there. And then public notification is required no later than 12 months from the day the water system learns the exceedance. So we've already talked about that. And then you also would need to contact the division if you exceed that 2.0. If you exceed 4.0 up to 10, you're going to turn off your fluoridation system, make repairs, notify the division and Salt Lake County immediately or within 24 hours, notify the public within 30 days, which is the division requirement, and then collect water samples throughout the system at several points, and then notify the division and the Salt Lake County Health Department when the system is turned back on. So very similar to Davis County's requirements there. And then if you exceed that 10.0 milligrams per liter, you're going to turn off the system immediately, of course, notify division and the health department, collect samples, and then again, must have Salt Lake County permission before you can resume fluoridation. All right, so this brings me to my next question. And I think I hammered this one into your heads as well. For fluoride overfeeds, which range does not require health department notification?
Okay, we just launched that poll, and Joe Goodman actually said that if he took his screen out of full screen mode, he was actually able to participate in the poll. So if some of you want to try that. But for fluoride overfeeds, which range does not require health department notification? Is it A, B, C, or D. And hopefully you guys have been listening to Randy, and it looks like most of you have been participating, and all of you guys have been participating. So let's close this on up and share the results. And 92% said D, 1.0 to 2.0, and only 8% said 2.1 to 4.0.
Okay, perfect. So D was the answer, 1.0 to 2.0. So for any overfeeds over 2.0, you will need to notify your local health department. But between 1.0 and 2.0, you do not need to notify the health department. You do not need to turn off your system, keep fluoridating, find the problem and resolve it. All right, operator safety. So there's quite a bit in rule already that refers to this, and I think Ying and Jeff will probably talk about some of this more in depth than me. So you can refer to some of these state rules to get some information on what's expected. Our regulations do have some requirements though for safety. Require that the safety data sheet should be posted at all chemical injection sites, and within those, SDS, you're going to find this important information about spill response, disposal, health hazards, first aids, and all that. We also require that neutralizing chemicals be kept nearby at all times. Our regulations specify a little bit of what's required for storage of fluoridation chemicals. So they need to be stored in a way that prevents cross-contamination. You need to allow enough room for all the storage of all the chemicals you have. Separate incompatible chemicals, keep chemicals dry, keep chemicals off the floor, bags and drums should be on pallets, everything should be properly labeled. Try not to allow anything in the storm drain, but especially fluorosilicic acid. And then any unsealed fluorosilicic acid containers should be vented to the outside atmosphere. And then tanks must have an overflow and receiving basin or drain capable of receiving accidental spills or overflows. I'm going to go through a couple pictures here. Let you guys look at this for a second and just see if you can identify what are some of the best management practices and what could be improved potentially here. So if you look at this, pay special attention to how things are labeled. These are set up pretty good. You can obviously see that there's secondary containment. It's actually labeled secondary containment. If there's a spill there, we're not going to see issues with it escaping containment, you wouldn't think. The only thing that I maybe would suggest here is that there be a label added to the tanks for the actual type of acid. So
all in all, this is a good example then, right?
Yeah, the only thing I would add was probably to label the tanks with hydrofluorosilicic acid. So it just says acid, but it probably should be a little bit more specific.
So if this is what your facility looks like, then you're in good shape.
Yes. Let's look at another one here.
That looks more like my garage.
It's a little cluttered, but there are some good things here. I mean, that is a double wall tank, so it does have the secondary containment. There is a day tank in the corner that's in a container that provides secondary containment for that as well. The big tank is restrained, so it won't fall over in an earthquake. So we like to see that. There is a pan with lime over here in the corner for any dripping that goes on, so that'll be neutralized. And then I don't think you can see this, but I guess the drain there on the floor is not directly connected to the sanitary sewer. So I think it actually goes to another tank that can be pumped out if there was to be a massive spill. One thing here, it's hard to tell if there's labeling on those tanks. So maybe we would need some additional labeling. And then also just notice where the ice wash and the emergency shower are located. They're kind of located across the room from the tank. So if there was a major leak, that's not ideal where you'd have to cross the room to get to the shower. Another picture, some of you probably already seen, not an ideal situation where you have hoses crossing an exposed area where people are going to walk, but they did make some adjustments here. They put the PVC over the hoses so that if there was a leak, it would not drip down on anybody. So we do like to see those kind of creative solutions. Let's look at this one. So one thing that we don't necessarily like to see is these two different chemicals stored in the same room. So you have hydroxylic acid and I think it's sodium hypochlorite. So you got chlorination and fluoridation in the same room. Not preferred for sure. We do like to see here though that there is separation between the two. So there is secondary containment. Those drains go down into tanks that can be pumped out, and then there is a barrier between the two areas so that the spills wouldn't mix.
Is that a raised barrier, Randy?
Yeah, so it's just like I think it's just a cement like step that's been poured into place between the two areas so that if there is a spill, they won't cross over into the opposite side. So some issues, again, the emergency shower is not in an ideal location. You don't want to be, if you're exposed to the acid, you're going to be still exposed to it probably if you have to shower right there. So not ideal. And then also the tanks are suspended up in the air with the pumps on the ground. So if there is an issue with a broken hose or something, you might have gravity cause the tanks to empty all the way out. So we prefer that the pumping be done from the top of the tank and not gravity fed. So if you do experience an accidental release in excess of 5 gallons, you should follow the release measures found in the SDS, notify the department within 24 hours in Salt Lake County or immediately in Davis County. So it is something we want to know as soon as possible in both counties if you do have a spill. And then use any control measures you have to try to prevent the spill from spreading and from entering storm drains or septic systems or sewer, and neutralize with lime. Okay, next question. Back to the training requirements. All operators must complete a minimum of 3 hours of fluoridation training every 2 years. True or false?
All right, I just launched that poll for you guys. True or false? All operators must complete a minimum of 3 hours of fluoridation training every 2 years. And Bailey also had some help, success when she took it out of full screen mode and participating in the poll. So I appreciate you guys helping me out and solving these technical difficulties. Thank you to Joe and Bailey. So true or false, all operators must complete a minimum of 3 hours of fluoridation training every 2 years. And we have a lot of you, most of you, 88% of you who have voted, so we're closing it up and sharing those results. And 97 said true and 3% said false.
Okay, great work. So the answer is true. So it is a little confusing because we have some differing requirements between Davis and Salt Lake County for initial training. So new employees, new operators require 6 hours of training to start in Salt Lake County and only 3 in Davis County. But for both counties, for continuing training, continuing education, all operators need 3 hours of training every 2 years, which I imagine is why a lot of you are here today. So that's pretty much my training. I did want to cover some of our numbers. Salt Lake County's numbers for 2018, you can see the averages for the year all fell within their range of 0.6 to 0.9. And you can see that green line down the middle of 0.7. They were all pretty close to that and maintain levels where they're supposed to. Davis County 2019 numbers, you can see a similar result. Everyone maintain their systems within 0.6 to 0.8, so great work. And then most were really close to that 0.7 target. So we feel really good about those numbers. So just some of the things that I want you to take away. Remember to kind of look through your operating procedures, emergency plans, look for things you can improve. Know your partners, so talk to the division, to local health departments, any other people that you may depend on in an emergency. We're available to help the local health departments. I know the division is as well. So if you have questions, please reach out. Get to know your system as good as you can. Make sure that you know how every part of your system works. Test your equipment regularly, make sure everything's functioning. And then just realize what the impact you guys are having is. There are 14 fluoridating water systems in Salt Lake County and 20 in Davis County, with a service area of almost 1.5 million people. So almost that many people are receiving this fluoridated water. So it's important that we take their safety seriously. Please feel free, like I said, to reach out to the health departments. Jeff Hitkin is the program lead over in Salt Lake County Health Department, and you can reach him there. His number, they do have an emergency number as well if you have after hours spills or other incidents. I'll leave this slide up for just a second if you need to write down any of those phone numbers. Feel free to reach out to them. Like we covered already, if you do have a spill, you're supposed to report to the department as soon as possible. Davis County, our regular business hours, you can call our office. We also have an after hours emergency number, at 801-807-8872. So that's how you contact us after hours if you do have a spill or any other emergency with fluoride or anything else water related. You can contact me at 525-5132, and then you can always contact our lab, Angie in the lab, who does all of our analysis, at that number there. That is all I have. So I appreciate your time, and hopefully I provided some useful information.
Right, and we are very glad to have Mr. Jeff Betton with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, the safety manager, to present on chemical safety, which we all know is very important. So I'm going to turn the controls over to Jeff right now. And there you go, Jeff. Take it away when you're ready. All right, Jeff, I see your screen.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, as Nicole just said, I am Jeff Betton. I'm Safety Manager at Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. I'm happy to be here today. In case you're wondering, I already called Salt Lake County and informed them that Nicole is storing large quantities of fluorosilicic acid in her garage.
That was our secret, Jeff.
Well, when you admitted it out to everyone, yeah, that looks like your garage. So, okay, so we can hear me okay, it sounds like. At least Nicole's responding, so I assume everyone can hear me just fine.
You sound great.
Continue on. Some of the things I'm going to go over are chemical background of fluoride, compounds used to fluoridate water, do a little review of safety data sheets, talk about proper handling of fluoride chemicals and the main health hazards of these chemicals, and also first aid in case of exposure, wanted exposure, so to speak, I guess. If you're working with it, you're obviously exposed a little bit. But first, fluoride comes from the element fluorine, so that's where we get the name from. Fluorine is the 13th most abundant element found in the Earth's crust, found just above chlorine on the periodic table of elements. It's a gas, but is always found as a combination of chemicals. When the compound is dissolved in water, compound dissociates into ions. It is this fluoride ion that we're interested in for preventing tooth decay. We're getting strengthen the surface of the teeth and keeps acids from eating away at the hard tooth enamel. Threw this in kind of as an extra, just as I thought it was interesting to show other ways, not just our water, where we consume fluoride. As you can see, just kind of on this little graph chart here, that fluoride is naturally present in a range of foods. And the maximum safe daily consumption of fluoride is 10 milligrams for an adult. So as you can see, kind of, if you look at the proportion there on the right-hand side of the screen, if you're getting your recommended daily intake of water that is fluoridated, you have a cup of black tea in the morning, you eat some raisins, some carrots, and you put down a bottle of wine in the evening, you're still just under half of the required, not the required, but the safe amount of fluoride to consume. So it just kind of gives you an idea where you see fluoride naturally and other things as well. Fluoridation chemical compounds. The three most used chemicals in water fluoridation are sodium fluoride, sodium fluorosilicate, and fluorosilicic acid, with the latter being the most widely used. Like most chemicals, these have a lot of synonyms. As you can see, I have many of them up there, but I will be referring to them as the ones I just said, which are bolded and underlined there. But just first, as an operator, what is the best resource to get a better understanding of these chemicals, or really any other chemical you may handle? I assumed you all answered safety data sheets, and if you did, that is correct. First poll question, Nicole put it out. I'm going to go ahead and just read it real quick. It says, what chemical compounds does your water system use to fluoridate its water? A, sodium fluoride, B, sodium fluorosilicate, C, fluorosilicic acid, D, multiple chemical compounds. Okay.
All right, I just launched that poll. I am not going to read the answers because I always butcher them. So what chemical compounds does your water system use to fluoridate its water? Is it A, B, C, or D? And we have just over half of you that have voted, so I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes to participate. And like Bailey and Joe said, if you guys were in the full screen mode, some of you, the polls weren't working. So if you want to take it out of full screen mode and participate in the polls, that was helping. So I appreciate you guys helping me troubleshoot here. Real quickly, last chance, what chemical compounds does your water system use to fluoridate its water? And I'm going to close it on up here, and I'll read you the responses, Jeff, and share it with the group. About 6% said A, sodium fluoride, B, or 3% said sodium fluor, about 3% said B, 88% said C, and 3% said multiple chemical compounds.
We live in a world of chemicals. Our bodies produce and use chemicals. Plants and trees produce them. Even water is a chemical compound. Other chemicals in our world are man-made synthetic compounds. Although we don't know exactly how many man-made chemicals are in use today, experts generally agree it could be more than 100,000. Gasoline, paints, household cleaners, detergents, toiletries, wipes, solvents, everyday products used at home or work are made of chemicals. Before using any chemical product, you should find out all you can about it, and this information is literally at your fingertips in free publications called Safety Data Sheets, or SDSs. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard requires chemical manufacturers, distributors, or importers to provide safety data sheets, formerly known as Material Safety Data Sheets or MSDSs, to communicate the hazards of chemical products. All safety data sheets are required to follow a specific format and provide detailed information in 16 different sections. To protect yourself, your coworkers, and your family members, here are the top 10 things you should look for on a product safety data sheet. What is the emergency phone number? If someone is injured, hurt, falls ill, or poisoned by a chemical product, who would we call to get more information? You can be sure emergency medical personnel, especially physicians and nurses, will want to see the safety data sheet. The manufacturer or distributor's name, address, and phone number is required to be right up front in Section 1, along with 24/7 emergency phone numbers. What is this product recommended for, and are there any restrictions on its use? This information is also required to be included in Section 1. How dangerous is this product? Statements like causes irreversible eye damage, highly flammable, and can cause central nervous system damage appear on safety data sheets even for seemingly harmless everyday household products. Section 2 is called Hazards Identification, and it is required to include all hazards regarding the chemical. What do you do if the product gets in your eyes, on your skin? What if you inhale or swallow some? Section 4, First Aid Measures, lists the signs and symptoms of exposure to the chemicals and whether the effects are usually immediate or delayed, and the appropriate first aid measures to take. If the product is accidentally spilled or otherwise released from its container, how do we clean it up? What materials can we use? And how do we dispose of everything properly? Should we wear masks or gloves, eye protection? All this should be listed under Section 6, Accidental Release Measures. Are there any specific cautions we should be aware of to make sure we are safely handling and storing the containers of this product? Is it dangerous to store in certain places or near other chemicals or products? Does it have to be in a temperature-controlled environment? Section 7, Handling and Storage, provides this information. When using this product, what personal protective equipment should we be using? Should we use special gloves, splash goggles, or protective clothing? What should we do to prevent exposure to any hazardous chemicals in the product? Will we need to provide extra ventilation? Section 8, Exposure Controls, Personal Protection, tells us what we need to do to engineer a safe environment when using the chemical. What does the product look like? What color is it? Does it have a distinctive odor? Are the vapors heavier or lighter than air? At what temperature will it ignite? Is it an acid or alkali? Section 9, Physical and Chemical Properties, lists the chemical characteristics we should know. What other materials should never be mixed with this product? Can it become unstable if exposed to heat, light, or anything else? Could this product react with other materials like metals, causing it to decompose into a dangerous, hazardous chemical? Some chemicals, when combined with certain others, can cause an explosion or fire. Section 10, Stability and Reactivity, outlines these cautions along with any known hazardous reactions. One of the most important sections of the SDS is Section 11, Toxicological Information. Could repeated exposures to this product cause allergic reactions? Are there any short or long-term health effects to exposure? Is this product associated with birth defects? Can exposure cause genetic mutations? Can it affect reproductive organs or the development of a fetus? By what routes can this chemical enter our bodies? And is anything in this product known to promote or cause cancers? Section 11 outlines this important information. When working with chemicals, we can never have enough information. Get the safety data sheets and read them thoroughly. Protect yourself, your coworkers, and your family.
So I just wanted to show that video to remind you, remind everybody, really the best resource to better understand and to work safely with not only fluoridation chemicals, but all chemicals is the safety data sheet. So I encourage all of you to take the time to look through the SDS of the chemicals you handle in your workplace. Before I get into some specific fluoridation chemical safety, I want to just go over some generals for all of the fluoridation chemicals. some general safety tips. One we just talked about, get familiar with your SDS. Just saw the video, why that's a good idea. Second, keep fluoride chemicals in designated areas separate from other chemicals. Have a cleanup plan for spills. Know the first aid procedures in case of toxic exposure. Again, I'll discuss this one for further detail later. Know the location of your emergency showers and eye wash stations and maintain them regularly. And you also want to report, record, and review all incidents, including near misses. This is an opportunity to fix any deficiencies and prevent reoccurrence.
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah.
you were just kind of breaking up. Do you mind just reading those over again one more time? Just the bullet points.
Oh, all of them?
Yeah, just going through them real quick again. You just kind of broke up. You don't have to animate them again. Just read through them real quickly.
Okay. I wonder if there's a delay when I cue them or something. Okay, but get familiar with the SDS. Video kind of talked about why it's a good idea. Keep fluoride chemicals in designated areas separate from other chemicals. Have a cleanup plan for spills. Know first aid procedures for in case of toxic exposure. Know the location of your emergency showers and eye wash stations, and make sure they're maintained regularly. And then report, record, and review all incidents, including near misses. So that way, that gives you an opportunity to fix any deficiencies and prevent reoccurrence of the similar incident from happening. Did we get that?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Okay, just let me know if it cuts out or anything again. I'll keep moving along. Well, the first one I'm going to talk about, first chemical, is was the first one to fluoridate drinking water, sodium fluoride. It is white, odorless, and comes either in a powder or crystal form. It is usually introduced to your water system through a saturator. And I'm just going to jump right into the next one because they're similar. I'll kind of talk about these two together before I move on to the acid. Sodium fluorosilicate is also white, odorless, and comes in either a powder or crystal form. It is usually introduced to your system through a dry feeder system. Okay, so this refers to those two chemicals I just mentioned, fluoride powder safety. Dust is the most frequent encountered hazard in handling sodium fluoride and sodium fluorosilicate. Because of this, crystalline type is preferred when manual handling is involved, as it will produce less. You want to prevent dust from entering any open cuts or sores. Make sure to frequently inspect any dust collection equipment to ensure they are working properly. And always have an emergency eye wash station nearby. Working with fluoride powders, the PPE you should use is NIOSH approved dust respirator with the correct cartridges. That's National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. They're the ones who regulate the respirators. So just look for that symbol, but usually everything will note that when you purchase it. Goggles, either neoprene or rubber gloves, apron, and boots. And with powders, it is very important to clean your PPE frequently. You want to handle the bags of fluoride powders carefully. Don't tear bags or puncture bags. Use a knife to open the bags and make a clean cut. Pour gently to reduce the dust to a minimum. Empty bags completely. Do not store partially filled bags for later. Carefully place empty bags within a plastic bag and then dispose with other trash. Wash hands immediately after handling. Never eat, drink, or smoke where these compounds are stored or used. Okay, I will go ahead and read this, and Nicole will launch this next poll question. How often are your facilities' emergency showers and eye wash stations being maintained? Monthly, quarterly, annually, or longer? Don't know.
All right, I just launched that poll question. How often are they maintained? So go ahead and jump in here and vote, or put your answers into the chat function if it is not working. So how often are your facilities, emergency showers, and eye wash stations being maintained? A, monthly, B, quarterly, C, annually, or longer, or D, I have no idea, and hopefully it is not D. Oh man, there's a few of you where it's D. I'm going to give you guys one more second to vote, and I'm closing it up and sharing the answers. 83% said monthly, 6% said quarterly, and sadly, Jeff, 11% said they had no idea.
Okay, well, I will. Yeah, sadly, but depends on how your system works. That either can be you don't know and it's not getting maintained, or it's another crew. Say we have an operator.
Not your
and
job, not your
does
function.
it, not your job. Yeah. So, but just good information for me to kind of just have an idea what's going on out there.
Which could mean it's just getting done, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. And if you don't know, maybe double check, because this goes back to your safety. If you're handling the chemicals, you want to make sure those are operational and maintained properly. Let's see. It looks like we're up for a video. And just so you know, the recommend is monthly. So that's how often they should be done.
Where are your eye wash stations? When will you need them? Dirt, dust, or chemicals can be stirred up in the air and get blown into your eyes. Chemicals or other materials can be splashed onto your face and into your eyes. Anything on your hands or gloves, particles, chemicals, or other materials can get rubbed into your eyes. If something like a corrosive chemical gets into your eyes, the first few moments are the most critical. Damage to the eyes starts immediately, so the quicker you get emergency first aid, the more you limit the amount of damage. That's why you need to know where the emergency eye wash stations are located. It is important to know where they are and how to use them. Once you locate the eye wash station, familiarize yourself with how it operates. Is it full and operating normally? Do you know how to work it? When was the last time it was inspected? Stations should be tested monthly to be sure they are correctly maintained and operating properly. Is the route to the station clear and unobstructed? Keep a clear, unobstructed path to the emergency eye wash. Remember that water does not neutralize contaminants. It merely dilutes them and flushes them away. If the nature of the contaminant is not known, flush for a longer time. A normal emergency station should provide a full, thorough flush for at least 15 minutes. Small bottles are not considered emergency eye wash stations. They are to be used while the person is being taken or traveling to the larger eye wash station. Know how to protect your eyes. Your vision is critical. Thanks for watching and have a safe day.
Yeah, that video is just a good reminder to know where your eye wash and emergency shower stations are and know how they work. So I'd ask next time you're out near your chemical facilities, take a look around, find them, make sure you know how they work. I think sometimes we forget they're just there and they really don't get used. They're there for an emergency, and so they can be easily overlooked or forgotten about. And so we want to make sure they're maintained, but also know where they are and how to use it. So take a minute to find them, be aware of their location if you had to get to them, especially if you had something in your eye, right? So you're not seeing right. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to move past the powder and crystals and move into the acid, fluorosilicic acid. This is the third one I'm talking about, the most widely used fluoridation compound. It is a liquid, about 20 to 25% acid. It is water white in color and has a pungent odor. It fumes. Fumes are lighter than air. Extremely corrosive with a pH between 1 to 1.5. And this is introduced to your water system through injection, acid injection. Okay, so some fluorosilicic acid safety things you'll want to know are handle with care, avoid spills or splashes, will cause a delayed burn on skin tissue. Keep acid off closed skin and out of eyes. Work in ventilated, well-ventilated areas. Don't breathe in fumes. Clean all spills immediately. Wash hands immediately after handling. Never eat or drink or smoke where stored or handled. Make sure there's a working safety shower and eye wash station nearby. Avoid heat, sparks, flames, or other ignition sources. Fluoride compounds, once ignited, will decompose to fluoride gas. Or separate from oxidizing agents, alkalis, metals, combustible materials, and other acids. Basically saying try to store it on its own away from everything else. Recommended PPE for fluorosilicic acid. Preferably a full face shield and goggles. Acid resistant gloves, apron, and boots. And chemical respirators with acid fume cartridges should be worn if the concentration of fumes is sufficient to irritate the nose. So depending on how well ventilated the area is, you might want to keep that in mind. Okay, so I talked about some of the safety with specific the fluoride chemicals, but what happens if we're exposed to any of them? There are two types of possible exposures to fluoride compounds. First is chronic, which is exposure to large doses over a number of years. The next is acute, which is exposure to a single massive dose. First, I'll discuss chronic toxic exposure. Effects of low levels of fluoride, 2 to 8 times the optimal level over a prolonged period, can cause dental fluorosis or mottled enamel of the teeth. This is actually usually caused by consumption of high amounts of fluoride, mainly from natural occurring high concentrated. Skeletal fluorosis, again, is a calcification of ligaments and tendons, and of the vertebrae consolidation can occur. Again, this is mainly from natural occurring high concentrated fluoride levels. There are areas where the groundwater has very high fluoride, where 10, 20, 30 milligrams per liter, extremely high levels. And if you're consuming that without removing it, then you can run into these first two mainly. Other things are higher doses, skeletal fluorosis. I talked about other symptoms that one may experience from chronic toxic fluoride exposure: general lack of appetite, slight nausea, some shortness of breath, constipation, pain in the liver region, anemia, which is low red blood cell count. The greatest chance for chronic exposure comes from dust feeders. We're using hoppers, breathing in the dust. But it can also occur from breathing in acid fumes for long periods of time, prolonged periods. Maximum allowable concentration of fluoride dust is 2.5 milligrams per cubic meter of air, average over an 8-hour work shift. So this is actually, they call it a threshold limit value, a level a worker can be exposed to day after day working for a lifetime without adverse effects. But again, usually those dust hoppers are the ones you worry most about for chronic toxic exposure. I'm going to talk about the acute toxic exposure. So acute, remember, is the being exposed to a large dose all at once. And this either can be, and for fluoride, this is also known as fluoride poisoning, may result from ingestion, inhalation, or bodily contact. Ingested fluoride may cause nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, diarrhea, muscle weakness, may cause severe irritation and burns of the mouth, throat, and digestive tract. Symptoms of acute exposure by inhalation of dust or vapor include sharp biting pains in the nose, followed by nasal discharges or nosebleed, coughing, or respiratory distress. Skin or eye contact may cause tingling or burning sensations, or severe irritation or burns, even permanent damage to the skin or eyes, especially with acid. Other signs of acute toxic exposure include weakness, having trouble speaking, being very thirsty, and having poor color vision. So, what do you do if you're exposed to large amounts of fluoride chemical? Once fluoride poisoning has been established, first aid treatment should be started by also calling for emergency medical help. First aid for airborne fluoride poisoning. Move victim from exposed area. Keep victim calm and quiet. Place victim in sitting position, at minimum with head and shoulders raised. High pressure for bloody nose. Seek emergency medical assistance. Fluoride acid splashes, you want to wash chemical from skin or eyes with large amounts of water as quickly as possible. Remove the victim's clothing from affected skin area and continue washing. Thorough washing covers skin or eyes with clean, dry, protective dressing. Transport for emergency medical assistance. So all eye injuries, if I can get that out, need medical review by physician no matter how slight the injury. So keep that in mind. If you think you got it out, you want to just go check out your eyes because it could continue to burn and your eyes are much more sensitive than, say, even your skin. So, Nicole.
Hey, Jeff, how long do you wash your, like, a skin injury for compared to an eye injury for? How long do you wash those out? Is there a suggested time?
Yeah, you want to keep washing as long as possible, but the suggested time is a minimum of 15 minutes. And so, but if you can stay longer, you just want to keep doing it because with acid, there can kind of be a slow burn. It can continue. So you just want to make sure it's all gone. It's not on clothing. If you can, remove as much clothing possible too, just to be safe, just to be sure. And so, but a minimum of 15 minutes. And if you can keep doing it or do it while you're waiting for depending on how serious it is, if you're waiting for emergency medical assistance to arrive, I would suggest you just stay there until they get there and continue to flush.
Thank you.
Okay, so now what happens if you ingest fluoride? Have victim drink as soon as possible a glass of lime water, milk, or even large quantities of water, and do not induce vomiting. And call for emergency medical assistance. You may have to treat for possible shock. And again, you want to keep the victim calm. Hey, another poll question. Are there accessible first aid supplies in the vicinity of your fluoride facilities? So this could either be first aid station, first aid cabinets, or even off your offsite if you have kits in your vehicles that you're arriving to these. And the facilities, yes, no, don't know.
All right, I just launched that. So again, like Jeff said, are there accessible first aid supplies in the vicinity of your fluoride facility? First aid cabinets, vehicle, first aid kits. A, yes, B, no, or C, don't know. And we've got about 80% of you who have voted. I am going to close it on up and share the results. And 93% said yes, and 7% said they don't know.
Okay, I'll take that. That's good. You definitely want that to be yes. If you don't know, find out. I'm glad there's no no's. And this would be for fluoride or anything else. It's good to have or any other chemicals, first aid stations nearby, whether it be in a facility or either in your vehicle. And remember to either to do that if you're doing that yourself, you're responsible for, or someone in your workplace is responsible to periodically go through those and make sure things are current, not expired, and replenish. Or if it's ever used, make sure to replenish what's been used. Okay. Okay, we already discussed many of the things you can do to avoid toxic exposure of fluoride compounds. Use the fluoridate water, but to recap, remember to wear proper PPE, use safety equipment, handle the chemicals properly, store them appropriately, wash your hands after handling, and never eat, drink, or smoke around the chemical. I think next I got my last video. Next I'm going to talk about fluoride spills, but here's a little news clip of fluoride spill in, let's see, Illinois that made the news back in 2011.
All across our area responded to a chemical leak this afternoon in Rock Island. The chemical was so strong that it was burning through the concrete there. News 8's Christy Mergenthal has the latest.
It was just before 1 o'clock Thursday afternoon when hazmat crews were called to the Rock Island Water Treatment Plant for a chemical spill coming from this tanker truck.
It's a corrosive agent that the water treatment plant uses, and there was an overflow that caused spillage out from the building onto this driveway behind me.
As plant employees evacuated, crews began suiting up, working quickly to stop the leak that had begun eating through concrete.
And they stopped the leak using some earthen berms with dirt, sand, and some commercial boom equipment, and had it contained pretty much to this facility within a short amount of time.
The chemical hydrofluorosilic acid is used to add fluoride to the plant's water. Although it poses a burn risk to skin, those living nearby were in no immediate danger.
There's no inhalation hazard at all, so there was no need for us to evacuate any residents around the area.
After several hours, crews were able to clean up the leak, allowing operations to return to normal.
They had to cordon off the area, obviously, but as far as the treatment of the water and the amount of water being used by the public, there's no effect on that at all.
In Rock Island, Christy Mergenthal, WQAD Quad Cities, News 8.
Thank you, Christy. Investigators tonight still haven't given an official estimate on just how much of that chemical spilled out.
Hydrofluorosilicic acid, or fluorosilicic acid as I've been calling it, spill. As you can see, it can get pretty nasty if it gets out on the out of containment. And so, yeah, it is a very strong acid. So what if there is a spill? You want to have some kind of plan or SOP in place. Always have at least 2 people to help with cleanup of fluoride compounds. Use the proper PPE when handling fluoride spills. Know the location of neutralization chemicals. For small powder or crystal spills, carefully place spilled material in double-lined plastic bags. After everything's been cleaned up, thoroughly wash the area with large quantities of water. For large spills, like we just saw in the video, call for emergency assistance and seek advice from experts. Okay, in summary, be familiar with the fluoridation chemical compounds used at work. Read the SDS, understand the properties of these chemicals, avoid toxic exposure by always using proper PPE, following all the proper handling and storage procedures. Know the correct first aid procedures in case of exposure. Have and know your fluoride chemical spill plan.
Many different chemicals are used in water and wastewater treatment facilities. While the chemicals used here improve water quality and prevent waterborne disease, some are hazardous and, if mishandled, can cause severe injury or death. This video will discuss some of the common chemicals we use, how to store and use them, and the protective equipment you'll need. There are several ways chemicals enter our bodies. One is through inhalation through our nose and mouth. Chemicals also enter our body through ingestion when we unintentionally swallow a hazardous substance. Absorption is the other route that chemicals take as they enter our skin when we come in contact with them. It's important for water utility and wastewater employees to have an understanding of what chemicals present a hazard and how those chemicals can be handled safely so they don't enter our bodies. Chemical storage and treatment areas should be clearly marked as to the hazards associated with these areas. All chemicals used in water treatment must be properly categorized and labeled as a part of OSHA's adoption of the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, known as GHS. The key to understanding hazardous chemicals is right here, the label. All hazardous chemical labels must be legible in English and prominently displayed on the container. Labels must have a product identifier, a name, address, and telephone number of the chemical manufacturer or importer, a pictogram, signal word, a hazard statement, and a precautionary statement. Specific details of labeling requirements are discussed in detail in AWWA's Safety First Hazard Communications for Water and Wastewater Utilities. If chemicals at a water utility are transferred to another container, the new container should have the same labels and information of the original. For specific details on individual chemicals, employees will need to refer to the safety data sheets, formerly known as MSDS. Safety data sheets, or SDS, must be printed in English and be readily accessible in each work area where the chemical is used. The SDS sheets can be kept in a book, as individual sheets, or on a computer, as long as workers can access them without leaving the work area. These documents are the primary source and provide the greatest detail about each chemical to workers. The SDS will verify the information on the chemical label, help you determine what personal protective equipment is needed, and tell you if symptoms you are experiencing might be caused by the chemical. PPE recommendations are based on the SDS for each chemical, but should be evaluated by individual utilities to make sure they are appropriate for the utility's established chemical handling processes. Use protection anytime there's a potential for injury to the eyes or face from flying particles, molten metal, liquid chemicals, acids or caustic liquids, chemical gases or vapors, and dangerous light radiation. Each eye and face protective device is designed for a particular hazard. Utilities are responsible to provide a type of protector suitable for the work performed, and employees are obligated to use them, as are any visitors. Protectors must meet the following minimum requirements: be reasonably comfortable when worn under the designated conditions, fit snugly without interfering with the movements of vision, provide adequate protection against the particular hazards for which they are designed, be durable, and be kept clean, disinfected, and in good repair. Safety spectacles or glasses have lenses, temples, and side shields to protect against flying objects. Safety goggles are designed to fit the face snugly, immediately surrounding the eyes to prevent exposure to liquid or hazardous substances, as well as to protect against impact. Filtered lenses or goggles or face shields reduce the effects of ultraviolet light and infrared light. They are used in welding, cutting, brazing, and soldering. The required lenses for each varies depending on the task. Face shields are not considered eye protection. They are considered a secondary device and can only be used with a primary protector such as spectacles and goggles. Persons who use corrective spectacles can meet OSHA standards by wearing spectacles with protective lenses and side shields. Goggles or face shields worn over corrective spectacles, or goggles that incorporate corrective lenses mounted behind the protective lens. Some employers provide financial assistance in purchasing prescription safety glasses. The lenses of eye protectors must be kept clean. Vision through dirty lenses can cause eye strain, which is often used as an excuse for not wearing them. They should be inspected daily and cleaned with soap and hot water or with a cleaning solution and tissue. It's also important to have emergency eye washes placed in all hazardous locations. First aid instructions should accompany the eye wash station, and stations should be inspected regularly, up to weekly, according to the manufacturer's recommendations. Employees should be trained in the operation of these stations prior to needing them in an emergency.
In 1983, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, published their Hazard Communication Standard. This important standard was often referred to as the Employee Right to Know Standard because it was developed to ensure that workers had access to information and training about the hazards of the chemicals and products they were exposed to at work. One of the major requirements of OSHA's HAZCOM standard was for manufacturers and distributors of hazardous products to develop and make available material safety data sheets for their products. But while the OSHA standard mandated very specific health and safety information about the products be provided on the material safety data sheets, HAZCOM was a performance-based standard, meaning there was no specific format that had to be utilized by the manufacturers and distributors when developing their MSDS, nor were there any standardized hazard ratings or precautions. As a result, MSDSs took on all shapes and forms, in part because manufacturers and distributors used different formats as they prepared these documents. As you can imagine, that led to a lot of frustration among workers. Eventually, it was determined that the OSHA HAZCOM standard, as written, was not meeting its original intent, which was to help employees know exactly what they were working with, how it could harm them, and most importantly, how to protect themselves. So, in 2012, OSHA revised their hazard communication standard and did away with the requirements for material safety data sheets. Now, manufacturers and distributors of hazardous chemicals and products will have to start providing a new informational document called a Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. While the information contained on new safety data sheets is very similar to that appearing on the old MSDSs, the information will now have to follow a specific format and order. There is also a standardized hazard classification system that must be utilized on all SDSs to convey information about the physical and health-related hazards associated with that product, and the revised HAZCOM standard now requires that employers train their employees on how to read and understand the new GHS safety data sheet format. So the standard changed from employee right to know to employee right to understand. As part of the revision to their HAZCOM standard, OSHA adopted the GHS formatting requirements for safety data sheets. GHS stands for the Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. The GHS is a standardized system, meaning there will be consistency in the information appearing in safety data sheets. This system was developed by the United Nations, which means that once fully adopted and implemented, safety data sheets for products from around the world will be prepared in a standardized format, which is important in our global economy. In the new format, all safety data sheets will be broken down into 16 separate sections. The sections will always have the same titles and will always appear in the same order. Now let's take a look at the information that must appear on GHS compliant safety data sheets, starting with Section 1. Section 1 on safety data sheets is titled Identification. This is where you will find the name of the product as it appears on the container label, and in some cases applicable synonyms or chemical classification codes used for the product. You will also find supplier information, including the name of the manufacturer or distributor of the product, their address, and emergency contact number. And on some safety data sheets you may see supplemental information about the product, such as the intended use for the product, directions for its use, and possibly an expiration date. All this information must match that appearing on the container label. The second section of a safety data sheet is titled Hazard Identification. Here you will find the GHS hazard classifications for the product, including those for each health hazard and physical hazard, and their individual ratings in applicable hazard categories. You will also find the appropriate signal word associated with the product. There are only two signal words that are used in the GHS system. Either the word danger, which indicates a relatively severe or immediate hazard, or warning, which indicates a less severe but still potentially harmful level of hazard. This section will also display one or several hazard statements. Statements such as these two examples give employees a quick warning about what hazards are associated with the product and differ according to the classification and categories of hazards presented by the product. Section 2 of the safety data sheet also displays applicable precautionary statements. These are also standardized in the GHS system and in general convey information about how to prevent or lessen exposure to the hazards of a product. And something fairly new to us here in the United States are pictograms. Pictograms are standardized icons that let workers quickly identify the types of hazards associated with the product. There are 8 different pictograms for the health and safety hazards covered in the GHS system. A more detailed explanation of hazard statements, precautionary statements, and pictograms is provided on our online tutorial titled GHS Labeling Requirements, which is also available for free on our website. And last but not least, information about any unclassified hazards that are not covered in the GHS system, such as combustible dust, will be provided in this section. Section 3 of Safety Data Sheets, titled Composition and Information on Ingredients, identifies chemicals contained in the product. This could be a single ingredient for a pure substance, or 2 or more ingredients if the product is a mixture or contains impurities or stabilizers that contribute to the hazards of a product. You will also find the common name and any synonyms that may be used for the product, as well as the applicable Chemical Abstracts Services or CAS number. When the product is a mixture of hazardous chemicals, the safety data sheet will also list the concentration of all ingredients which are classified as hazards, expressed in either percentages or ranges by weight. And for chemicals where a trade secret is claimed, there will be a statement that the specific chemical identity and or its composition have been withheld as a trade secret. Section 4 on a safety data sheet describes the initial first aid measures that should be administered by responders to anyone who has experienced a chemical exposure. This information includes a list of aid for different routes of exposure, such as contact with eyes or skin, inhalation, or ingestion. Also included will be a description of the most common symptoms of overexposure, including those which are acute or delayed, and recommendations for immediate medical care and special treatment that may be needed in some severe cases. Section 5 provides the manufacturer's recommendations for fighting a fire that involves their product. Here you will find a recommendation for the most suitable type of equipment for extinguishing a fire involving the product, as well as information about extinguishers that are not appropriate for use. You will also find details about specific hazards that may develop when the product is involved in a fire, as well as hazardous byproducts that may be generated during the combustion of the chemical. And in some cases, you may see recommendations for special protective equipment or precautions to be utilized by fire brigades or firefighters. Section 6 of the safety data sheet provides the manufacturer's recommendations for responding to spills, leaks, or accidental releases of their product. This could include response measures for containment and cleanup methods to be used to prevent or minimize exposure for response personnel. This may include specific recommendations for protecting personnel involved in the response from specific hazards, such as sources of ignition or lack of ventilation, recommended personal protective equipment to prevent personnel from being contaminated during the response, and emergency procedures, including instructions for evacuation of response personnel when needed, as well as others located nearby. Section 7 will provide information pertinent to safe handling and conditions for safe storage of the product. The required information consists of precautions for safe handling to prevent or minimize the release of the chemical into the environment, to prevent exposure or contamination for personnel handling the product, and recommended hygiene practices. For example, prohibitions against smoking, eating, or drinking in or near areas where the product is being handled. And when the product is being stored, there may be a need to avoid certain incompatible materials or agents such as high heat or water that might cause the product to react. Section 8 of the safety data sheet, titled Exposure Controls and Personal Protection, lists the OSHA permissible exposure limits, or PELs, for the chemical or chemicals contained in the product. These mandatory limits dictate when it will be necessary to utilize controls such as ventilation systems or respiratory protection devices to protect workers from the ill effects of overexposure to the chemical. There may also be listings for voluntary threshold limit values, or TLVs, established by the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, or similar limits recommended by other groups. This section will also list appropriate engineering controls, where applicable, such as recommendations for exhaust ventilation systems or enclosures to contain emissions. And, of utmost importance, you will find the manufacturer's recommendations for personal protective equipment, or PPE, including any special requirements for providing certain types of PPE, such as respirators, goggles, or gloves. Section 9 of the safety data sheet identifies all applicable physical and chemical properties associated with the product. While most workers may not care about this type of information, safety managers and engineers may have a need to know about specific information on the product, including but not limited to: what does it smell like? What does it look like? At what temperature does the product freeze or boil? They may also need to know at what temperature the product emits enough vapors to catch on fire or cause an explosion. How much vapor must be present at the point of ignition to burn or cause an explosion, and are the vapors heavier than air or lighter? And when dealing with corrosive products, it may be necessary to know the pH of the chemical. Section 10 of a safety data sheet is titled Stability and Reactivity. Here you will find important information identifying any other materials which may be incompatible with the product, as well as any conditions to avoid during storage or handling, such as temperature extremes, shock, and static discharge. There will also be information about any conditions that could cause the chemical to react or polymerize, as this could cause the product to release excessive pressure or heat, or create decomposition products that could be harmful to exposed workers. And when applicable, this section will also provide information about stabilizers that may be needed to maintain stability of the product. Section 11, titled Toxicological Information, lists the known routes of exposure the chemical can use to get into your system, including inhalation, ingestion, and skin and eye contact. Also listed are the effects of exposure to the product, which include acute and chronic effects, applicable target organ effects, and a description of symptoms associated with overexposure to the product. There will also be specific measures of toxicity where applicable, such as LD50. That is the estimated amount of a substance expected to kill half of exposed test animals in a single dose. And if a chemical is listed as an actual or potential carcinogen, that information will be provided in this section too. Section 12, Ecological Information. Section 13, Disposal Considerations. Section 14, Transportation Information, and Section 15, Regulatory Information, all deal with requirements regulated by other entities such as the Environmental Protection Agency or the Department of Transportation. Therefore, these sections are not regulated by OSHA, but appear in the safety data sheet to be consistent with the GHS format. And finally, Section 16 of Safety Data Sheets, titled Other Information, lists details such as the date the safety data sheet was prepared, if this is the original version issued or a revised version, and in some cases an overview of any changes that were made during the last revision. And in some cases, the manufacturer or distributor may choose to put other information about their product in this section, as well as any applicable disclaimers. Employers are responsible for gathering new safety data sheets for all hazardous chemicals and products to which their employees are exposed, and make sure they are readily accessible during each work shift to employees while they are in their work areas. And employers must provide training to their workers regarding the new safety data sheet format. All these things must be done by the deadlines established by OSHA in their revised hazard communication standard. Speaking of deadlines, here is an overview of some very important dates. The revised hazard communication standard, which requires the use of GHS compliant safety data sheets, was published on March 24, 2012. Manufacturers and distributors of hazardous chemicals and products have until June 1st of 2015 to begin distribution of the new safety data sheets. However, many of them have already started providing safety data sheets that meet the new format or will do so long before the due date. Therefore, OSHA requires employers to get a head start and begin training all their workers on how to read and understand the new safety data sheets, and they have until December 1st of 2013 to get that training complete. And on a related note, employers must also update their written hazard communication programs to reflect the changes brought about by the adoption of the GHS system of labeling and hazard classification. So in review, the revised OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, which has the goal of making sure employees understand what hazardous chemicals and products are in the workplace and how to work safely with and around those items, requires GHS compliant safety data sheets be developed and provided for all hazardous chemicals and products. These safety data sheets are standardized in format, will always be comprised of 16 sections that appear in the same order, and provide standardized warnings and precautions applicable to the product. Also, employers must provide training for affected workers so they can find and understand the information that appears on safety data sheets. If you have any questions about the GHS format for safety data sheets or about the hazards of any of the products you work with, contact your employer safety representative or feel free to contact the safety professionals at OSHA Training Services through our website.
I know Ying Ying is ready to get going, and she is our next presenter. She is the Assistant Director of the Utah Division of Drinking Water. And thank you all again for still being with us. Again, I am Nicole Baser. I work with the Intermountain Section AWWA. I will not be on here again with my sharing my screen the whole time. I just wanted to still let you guys know I am here, still fielding your questions and helping out. I appreciate you guys being so flexible with this training. Usually we are in person and we're not. We still just wanted to offer this training even though we're not able to be together and still provide this stuff for you guys. And we appreciate you joining us with this virtual training and being here today. You guys are doing excellent and adapting to the way things are going. So I am going to shut off my camera now, and we are going to turn things over to Ying Ying here shortly.
Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Ying Ying Macaulay. I'm the Assistant Director with the Division of Drinking Water. I want to introduce myself a little bit. I started in Division of Drinking Water in 1999, a year before the voters mandated fluoridation in Davis County and Salt County. So I was involved in the fluoridation review process for many years. And also, I was recently involved in the water systems fluoride overfeed incident, and see everything close up firsthand. I saw how hard the water system managers and operators and volunteers worked in response to a fluoride overfeed incident. And I don't wish that upon anyone. So being involved in a fluoride overfeed incident really brought a new meaning to me when I have this opportunity to share some experience and knowledge regarding fluoride with you. And I hope I can share some lessons learned, also the regulation requirement with you here that will help you to do your job. Let's start. Okay, I will quickly go through the fluoridation overview. This table is compiled by the federal government Center for Disease Control. In 2014, it shows Utah ranked number 42 in the nation. About 52% of Utah's population receives the fluoridated water. This table was compiled by the State of Utah Department of Health. Some water sources have natural fluoride level in the groundwater. These are the background fluoride levels without the added fluoride. The voters in Salt Lake County and Davis County voted to add fluoride to their drinking water supply. It took some time to prepare, design, and construct and install the fluoridation facilities until they were ready and in place and be put into operation. Okay. However, there are some water systems, they do have fluoridation facilities, but they are not regulated by local health departments. For example, we have some federal military installation water systems and also Brigham City in Box Elder County, also fluoridates. The regulatory agencies in Utah, we have State of Utah, Department of Health. We also have 2 local health departments. They are involved in regulating fluoride addition into drinking water. Specifically, Salt Lake County and Davis County, they implement the monitoring and reporting requirements related to fluoridation. Also, the local health departments are the entities that sets the optimal fluoride level at 0.7 currently. I work for Division of Drinking Water, and my agency has very specific design and construction standards related to fluoridation facilities. Division of Drinking Water also sets the drinking water maximum contamination level for fluoride. The primary MCL is 4 ppm. The secondary MCL is 2 ppm. Exceedance of the fluoridation secondary MCL of 2 ppm triggers public notice requirement. And I will elaborate a little bit on the public notice requirement since the audience had questioned about it. Specifically, if the fluoride overfeed is between 2 ppm and 4 ppm, it triggers a Tier 3 public notice. So that's within 1 year. So if you want to use the Consumer Confidence Report as a venue for the Tier 3 public notice, I think that's acceptable. However, if the exceedance is for the primary MCL, means your fluoride level in your drinking water supply is greater than 4 ppm, it triggers a level 2, Tier 2 public notice, means you have to notify the public within 30 days. Now, the Division of Drinking Water also has to do sanitary surveys of public drinking water facilities. That includes fluoridation. So in my presentation, I am going to try to include many sanitary survey questions that are related to fluoridation facility. So you're prepared for the future sanitary survey of your water system. Utah's regulation R309-535-5 specifically focus on fluoridation facilities. Please know that this regulation does not mandate fluoridation. So the Division of Drinking Water does not require addition of fluoride into drinking water. However, this regulation is applied if a water system installs a fluoridation facility, then its design and construction must comply with R309-535-5. The purpose of the rule covers 2 topics. The regulation is there to ensure operator safety. Second, the design requirement is to protect public health and prevent fluoride overfeed. There are 3 types of fluoridation facility. You have the acid injection type. This is the most common type in Utah. You also have saturator type of fluoridation facilities. Utah has a limited number of saturator type of facility. The 3rd type, dry feeder, I'm not aware of any dry feeder type in Utah. Fluoride chemicals, and both Randy and Jeff had covered in depth of these 3 types of chemicals. This summary table shows for acid injection, the most common type is fluorosilicic acid. For saturator, the most common type is the sodium fluoride chemical. Please pay attention to the pH value listed on the last row, because the pH is associated with your operation risks. To find out what type of chemical is used at your facility. Please know that I have 4 poll questions inserted throughout my presentation. These poll questions are just for fact checking. There's no right and wrong. We just want to know where we stand. And at the end of my presentation, I have 4 quiz questions. Those will be the technical questions. And my apology for moving those quiz questions to the end of the presentation. I assume that will be very close to lunchtime. Your blood sugar is low. So let's just buckle up and get ready for it, okay? All right, here comes the first poll question. Nicole?
Yes, and I just launched that, and I apologize. It looks like it didn't quite come through on my end 100% correctly, but it came through mostly. So it says your water system has the following types of fluoridation facility: A, acid injector; B, saturator; and it's supposed to say C, acid injection and saturator both; or D, dry feeder. So go ahead and answer those, and I am going to give you a few more seconds to plug in your answer, or if you guys still aren't able to participate in the poll questions, feel free to type it in, because it does record your answers and we will process that for your participation. So I will close this on up because it looks like 90% of you have voted, and share the responses. And it said 87 of them said acid injector, 3% said saturator, and 10% said both, Ying Ying.
And Nicole, just to make sure we don't have any dry feeder type, right?
No, nobody said dry feeder.
Okay, so to the audience, I did prepare some dry feeder presentation slides. Well, with your permission, I will just skip the dry feeder portion of those slides, okay? Let's move on. Okay, next, let's talk about the facility type and the personal protection equipment. For the acid type, you're dealing with the acid. The fluorosilicic acid is the most common chemical used, in Utah. It has very low pH and very corrosive. Be aware of that. Even its vapor has extreme acidity. Okay? For fluorosilicic acid injection process usually starts with bulk delivery to the bulk tank on site. From the bulk tank, the solution will go through the transfer pump, then goes to a day tank. From the day tank, the solution goes through the chemical feed pump, and it gets injected into the water line. This chemical feed pump provides the primary control of the chemical dosing, the fluoride dosing. When we do a sanitary survey, we look at all the components within this big rectangular box. Here's an example of the fluoridation facility. It's a building with 2 separate rooms. On the left, you see the control room. On the right, you see the acid storage and operating area. Okay. Sometimes you'll see a 3rd room for storing personal protection equipment. Now let's talk about what you will see in the control room. Usually you'll see a light and ventilation switch. You typically will see a display panel that shows the reading of the fluoride analyzer and the reading of the fluoride vapor level detected in the chemical storage and operating area. There's a new regulation. It says any facility constructed after January 1st of 2017, if separate rooms are provided, a view window must be provided between the control room and the fluoride operating area. The purpose of having a view window is for the operators and the inspectors so you can observe the fluoride operating area through the view window before you enter the fluoride operating area. Usually you'll see a warning sign, and it's a good practice to have a specific label on your door to identify the hazard. And another sign is you usually will see a vent pipe above the roof to provide the venting for the acid operating area. Next, we'll transition to talk about PPEs. First, let's look at the chemical compatibility information related to fluorosilicic acid. In this chart, it shows natural rubber, neoprene, and Noryl are three excellent materials that are resistant to fluorosilicic acid. So PPEs, such as your gloves or coveralls, should be made of one of these materials. Here's a picture of an operator suiting up for the acid injection facility. The regulation requires a full face shield and splash-proof safety goggle. And here's another picture, other pictures showing the acid-resistant gloves and apron and boots. So the regulation requires these, so when you receive a sanitary survey from the inspections, there will be a question about, these requirements. And I mentioned earlier that Division of Drinking Water sends inspectors to conduct sanitary survey of drinking water facilities. Throughout this presentation, you will see many survey questions inside the blue box. These questions are grouped to 4 groups. The first group is the general group. The questions in the general group applies to all types of fluoridation facilities. The second group of questions are very specific to the acid facilities. The third group of the survey questions applies to the saturator facilities. And the last group is for dry feeder facilities. Even though we don't have dry feeder facilities in Utah, but we do have the questions ready. And on the screen, you'll see a red asterisk at the end of the question. It indicates that if the answer is not compliant to this specific question, then the water system will be assessed a significant deficiency. Now let's talk about saturator. Sodium fluoride is the common chemical used for saturators. Its solution has a pH of 7. That means it's neutral, even though the solution is not acidic. The fluoride MCl impact remains the same, so it has a risk to operator by inhaling the powder, and so the operator needs to be very careful about the powder inhalation risks. And the MCl overfeed risk still exists for sodium fluoride chemical. For saturator process, you receive the delivery and you store the chemical on site in a dry and protected area. And the dry chemical is fed into a saturator. In the saturator, the saturated solution gets pumped through the feed pump. Again, the feed pump provides primary control of the fluoride dosing. From there, the saturated solution is fed to the water line. Here's an example of the fluoride saturator. You will see there is a supply water line. The makeup water line comes into the saturator. It has a vacuum breaker to prevent backflow. Then inside the saturator tank, you see the sodium fluoride powder, and then the powder stays on the bottom of the tank. Above it is a saturated solution. This saturated solution is pumped out and injected into the drinking water line. Here are the photos of the commercially available fluoride saturators. You can see the spider on the bottom of the tank. The regulation said for fluoride saturator facilities, the water operator or the water system must mark the minimum fluoride chemical depth for the saturated solution outside the saturated tank. That would be where that blue and green line separated. That's the minimum depth of the chemical that must exist. So here's a sanitary survey question corresponding to that requirement. Also, the regulation said the operation must minimize dust while handling and cleaning. Here's a corresponding saturator sanitary survey question. Okay. Another requirement is the makeup water supply going into the saturator must terminate above the solution tank or has a backflow prevention device. Here's the sanitary survey question. Another requirement. There must be a meter on the makeup water line to measure the quantity of the solution being fed. Here's a corresponding sanitary survey question. Dry feeder, I will skip this part. Here's a typical installation of dry feeder. All right, now let's talk about for dry fluoride chemicals. We require emergency eye wash for dry fluoride chemicals. Okay, it can be a emergency eye wash station, which is shown on the left, or it could be a portable emergency eye wash saline. For dry fluoride chemicals, the regulation requires a NIOSH-approved respirator and dust-resistant safety goggles, and we also require acid-resistant gloves and apron and boots. In the blue box, you will see the sanitary survey question related to these requirements. Now, let's talk about fluoride spills incidents. Fluoride spills in Utah is not a new thing. We have seen numerous fluoride acid spills in Utah's fluoridation facilities. Please be aware, if your system uses a fluorosilicic acid, know its low pH, extreme acidity, and corrosiveness. Knowing that this chemical is very corrosive will help you to handle the spills appropriately. For example, if you're handling acid, know your chemistry. A metal bucket will not stand up to the acid. While handling acid spills, I'm going to ask you, the water system operators, do you have a standard operating procedure in place for handling acid spills? For example, for small spills, you should have neutralizing chemical available on site for immediate use if you have a small spill. For large spill, you should have spill containment materials ready to deploy. It doesn't have to be on site, but it's good to have it in stock so you can deploy it anytime you need it. For catastrophic spill, we ask whether you have a secondary containment constructed and adequately sized to hold the maximum volume of the bulk tank. So in the sanitary survey question, during the acid portion, it asks whether there is a means to handle catastrophic failure of an acid bulk storage tank? You notice there is not a red asterisk after this question. So we included this question in the survey question set with the intent to bring awareness to the water operators, and there's no deficiency points associated with this question. Acid injection, the operation, the regulation says we do not allow manual acid dilution because with such a strong acid, manual dilution is very dangerous to the water operator. We also require neutralizing chemical on site for small spills. This is the sanitary survey question, okay? And here's a table giving you some information of the amount of lime is needed for neutralizing the acid spillage. Poll question number 2. Nicole?
Okay, yep, I'm going to launch that right now. Does your water system have a standard operating procedure in place for handling acid spills? A, yes, standard operating procedure for small spills only. B, yes, standard operating procedure for small and large spills. C, standard operating procedure for small, large, and catastrophic spills. D, no, not using acid, so no standard operating procedures for spills, or no, not using acid, so no. Oh, sorry, I did that one twice. So just do D, don't do the last one. I apologize. And I'll give you guys a couple more seconds. Do you guys have a standard operating procedure in place for handling spills? Is it A, B, C, or D? And I apologize, I did put D in there twice, but it looks like you guys are smart enough to not answer it twice. So I'm gonna close it up in just 1 second and share the results with you all. And Yingying, it was 23% said B, they do have a standard operating procedure for large spills, and 74% said C, for yes, for large and small spills, and only 3% said D, not using acid.
Wow, I'm surprised and I'm happy for the surprise that the majority of you have a standard operating procedure to handle various types of spills. That's great. Okay, let's talk about overfeed. Here's an example of a fluoride overfeed incident that happened in 2018 in Pennsylvania. In this case, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, agency, they reached a settlement with the city of Franklin. They issued a $25,000 civil penalty fine for the violation.
Yingying, I'm going to stop you real quick, and I'm just going to take control again and then give it back, because on my end it looks like the poll is still up, and I just want to make sure everything's working again. And so I'm gonna just give you control again. So hold on 1 second. I just want to make sure they can see your presentation and not the poll anymore, because when I was looking, it was still the poll even when I stopped sharing. So there I go. I gave you control again if you want to accept it. There we go. Now I can see your presentation. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, but did you guys hear me okay?
I could hear you. I just want to make sure we can see your presentation still too. So thank you. Go ahead.
All right. So in this case, the city of Franklin had to pay a $25,000 fee, the penalty fee for this violation. And in addition, the lead operator for the city of Franklin had to sign consent order, and he paid $2,500 civil penalty fee out of his own pocket for this violation, and he surrendered his water operator certification. We did have a fluoride overfeed incident in Sandy in 2019. It made it to the national news. It was a painful lesson for everyone, but we did learn a lot from this incident. This is probably the most important requirement among all the requirements I mentioned to minimize fluoride overfeed. The most important thing is have a secondary control included in your design. This secondary control requirement applies to all types of fluoridation facility, whether you're using saturator or whether you're using acid injection, doesn't matter. This is the most important requirement if you want to minimize fluoride overfeed. What do you mean? Secondary control. What we are saying is, in addition to control the dosing through the chemical feed pump, a day tank, a liquid level sensor, or a SCADA control, a flow switch, something that will help you to minimize the amount of fluoride that can be fed into the drinking water all at once. The regulation also said if there's no water operator on site, you will be required to either have a day tank or 2 secondary controls to minimize fluoride overfeed. Okay, here's the example. You see the bulk tank on top of the pedestal and the day tank at the ground. With this kind of setup, the day tank is automatically refilled by gravity. Is this a good design? No, because this design increases fluoride overfeed risk. Let's look at a different design. In this case, let's reverse the elevation of these 2 tanks. Move the day tank up and move the bulk tank down. So in this case, the bulk tank, the solution can only be transferred to the day tank through a transfer pump. And if there's an overflow from the day tank, it flows back to the bulk tank. This design will return the overflow from the day tank to the bulk tank. It reduces the risk of fluoride overfeed. We also recommend the transfer pump has a manual switch, so it can be activated only if it's manually pressed down. Now let's talk about design, operation, and lessons learned. The regulation said the water system is required to sample in the distribution system. Sampling in the distribution system is based on local health departments' monitoring and reporting requirements. The intent of sampling fluoride level in distribution system is to make sure the drinking water supply to the public has adequate and appropriate level of fluoride. However, water system should have a sampling point that is located downstream of the injection point. The intent of sampling at a location downstream of the fluoride injection point is for operation control and to give immediate feedback to the operator. This downstream sampling location should be at a location that would allow adequate mixing and accurate measurement of fluoride levels. Means you do not want to have this site too close to your injection point where you may end up having a wide variation of the fluoride level, and that's not good for your reporting. Okay. And this adequate mixing location should be either before the water leaves the facility or at the location in the distribution system before the first service connection. Okay. Sanitary survey questions. We ask, do you know your background fluoride level before the fluoride is added? Example, let's assume it's a well. The background fluoride level is 0.2. Then we ask, do you know what's your target dose that you intend to add? If the water operators say, oh, we add 0.5, then the next question says, so typical fluoride level what do you measure? If they say, yeah, we typically measure around 0.7, that's perfect. 0.2 plus 0.5 is 0.7. Then we ask, is the sampling location present for measuring the final fluoride level? And if they say yes, then we ask the surveyor to document where the sampling location is located. Okay. For chemical storage, the regulations require the chemical must be stored in a covered or sealed container. It has to be inside the building. Corresponding inspection questions. It also indicates incompatible chemicals must be stored separately. Storing incompatible chemicals with fluoride chemicals together can create a very unsafe situation for water operator. The next requirement says dry materials must be stored on pallets. For saturator type of fluoridation facilities, if you use a chemical that's powder or crystal form, it's a good practice to keep these chemicals on the pallet and elevate it from the ground. The reason is then you can avoid moisture and the caking of the chemicals, because these issues will create operational problem for water operators. The regulation also requires the solution tank to have a label. For fluoride feed pump, it must be sized to prevent overfeed. Means you don't want a feed pump that's too big, and it's sized for operational efficiency. It must have a built-in anti-siphon device. And the sanitary survey question in the general portion of the question is asked, when was the fluoride feed pump last calibrated to ensure accuracy? This question asks for informational response. The intent of this question is to make sure the water operators are aware of the need of calibrating the feed equipment. Now we are showing two questions related to fluoride testing equipment. Fluoride testing instruments are properly verified, zeroed, and recorded, split samples, or calibrated. When was a fluoride testing instrument last verified or calibrated?
Regarding, is that information that they need to know, or is it information that needs to be displayed?
That's the information they should be able to answer to the inspectors.
Thank you.
So I don't think it needs to be displayed. If they have any records on hand that they can show, hey, here's a log, you see, we documented, that's great. But they should be able to answer that question, okay? All right. Regarding chemical storage, the regulations are, oh, did I repeat myself? I did. Okay, now moving on. Lessons learned. And this is a true story. I had to dispute with a water system when they proposed to add a acid injection facility right in the same room with a gas chlorinator at the well house. The water system's point is, hey, we got a big well house. All we need to do is add, some tanks there to inject fluoride. And I hope this picture will convince people. And this picture is taken at the fluoride facility. And the operator told me they installed this doorknob about 6 months ago. Within 6 months, you can see how rusted it is because it shows the effect of a corrosive vapor. Just imagine the corrosive vapor's impact on the chlorine equipment and the electrical control panel. So it's not a good idea to store incompatible chemicals together. Just imagine if the acidic vapor compromises your gaseous chlorine cylinder. What a risk you're taking on. Okay, fluoride injection. If you inject fluoride under pressure, you must use a cork stop, and you must have an anti-siphon device for the fluoride feed line. Okay. The injection point should allow adequate mixing after injection. And injection point must be located downstream of the softener ion exchange processes. Light softening removes the fluoride chemical that you just added. The added fluoride chemicals also interferes with the ion exchange softening process and reduces the effectiveness of the ion exchange process. Here's a sanitary survey question. All right, here's a chemical resistant data. And what this shows is we are looking at fluorosilicic acid versus various type of materials. And you can see the rating changes. Let's look at 3 bad examples. Aluminum, nylon, ceramic, even epoxy. You look at the ratings, they do not stand up to fluorosilicic acid. Let's look at 2 good examples. Polypropylene and neoprene are very resistant to fluorosilicic acid. For chemicals and materials, we require the chemicals to meet NC/NSF 60 standard. That means it's certified for drinking water treatment. Please be aware you may encounter sanitary surveyor that would ask, show me the label, to prove that you're using the chemical that meets the NC/NSF 60 standards. For material and parts, be aware that you should use the material and parts that's corrosion resistant and compatible with the chemical you use. And for example, if you have any metal O-rings or metal washer in your facility, know that you do not use it for the acid, because these materials, they can be eaten away by the acid and cause a dangerous condition for the water operators. And we do not allow lead weight in the acid solution tank, because lead would completely be dissolved and creating a high lead concentration in your public drinking water supply. Okay, for the feed pump, you can see here's a typical LMI pump. You can see the tubing coming out of the pump. And if you are doing maintenance work of this feed pump, which type, here you have a blue box, you have a red box. Which box, do you use a rubber washer or an O-ring, or do you use a metal or the metal washer or metal O-ring? I hope you now have a clear idea that you avoid using anything that's metal for the acid facility. For power source that supplies power to your fluoride feed pump, the regulation says the electrical outlet is not continuously hot. What does the regulation say? It means the power supply is on only if the water is actively flowing in the pipe. Here is the sanitary survey question. Ask you whether your electrical outlet supplying the power to your feed pump is a non-standard receptacle type and is interconnected with a well pump or service pump. And this question ended with 2 asterisks. It indicates that this question comes with a hefty deficiency points if your answer to this question indicates non-compliance. This is a critical design in preventing fluoride overfeed. Okay. make sure your fluoride feed pump only gets the power when a well pump is running or when the service pump is running. That means there is water flowing in the pipe. A good practice, if you have a well or a fluoridation station that will be offline for an extended period of time, unplug the power supply. It's a good practice. Okay, in this picture, you see the feed pump has been unplugged from this electrical outlet. Do you have an SOP in place that you inspect your fluoride facilities and you unplug the power supply for the feed pump that's not going to be used for extended time? Okay, for secondary containment, the regulation says secondary containment must be provided for tanks containing corrosive solution. Then you may ask, what's corrosive solution? pH value is a typical measure for defining corrosiveness. Corrosive solution usually are the chemicals of very low pH, such as fluorosilicic acid, or the chemicals of very high pH, such as sodium hydroxide or caustic soda. Okay. The next requirement, secondary containment must be sized to handle maximum volume to be contained. In this case, you can see a blue barrel here, the spill tray, the black spill tray underneath it is carefully selected based on the volume of this blue container. And the surface of the secondary containment, it must be acid resistant. For example, if it's a concrete curb, you can apply the chemical to make it more acid resistant. If you have a sump, same thing. It could be a double wall tank. So if the inner wall surface is damaged, you still have an outer wall to protect it. Or you can use a leak detection probe. Let's look at, so these are, this is the secondary containment requirement for the acid facility. Then you're going to say, okay, what about saturator facilities? We still recommend secondary containment. The saturated sodium fluoride solution in the saturator has a pH of 7, so it's not corrosive. But sodium fluoride has an inhalation risk to water operators. And it's complicated if you try to clean up the sodium fluoride chemicals in case of spill. So we still recommend having secondary containment for saturators. Let's look at some examples. This is a concrete curb built to contain this bulk tank. And here's a day tank, and this day tank actually has 2 secondary containment. You can see the day tank, it has a plastic round container for secondary control, and both containers are sitting on a rectangle spill tray. This picture shows the day tank and the scale. Both are placed on the spill tray. And this picture shows on the, you can see the bulk tank and the day tank. And the day tank is elevated on a pedestal so to avoid the gravity feed risk. And both the bulk tank and the day tank are located inside a concrete curb area for secondary containment. In this example, you can see the gray tank is the acid tank. There is a white plastic container for secondary containment. Now you can see a wire coming out in between the day tank and the secondary containment. This wire is connected to a leak detection probe. Okay. Acid facility is required to have a deluge shower, a safety shower, and emergency eye wash. Sanitary inspection questions. And the emergency shower and eye wash station should be located close to but outside of the asset operating area. Means you want it to be nearby, but you wanted the location also be safe to the operator in case there is an active assets leak situation. Now you see the temporary water supply and the temperature control for the safety shower and eye wash station. These 3 photos were taken at the site that had corrosive vapor inside the building. You can see the impact on the metal piping and control panel by the corrosive vapor. These photos illustrate the importance of adequate and effective venting for the fluorosilicic acid storage and operating area. So in the sanitary survey question, in the general portion, we ask whether there's a vent for the chemical storage, injection, and operating area. That's the building. In the acid portion of the sanitary survey question, we ask whether your solution tanks have a vent that diverts the vapor to the outside of the building. This photo is taken inside a fluorosilicic acid facility. You can see the impact, okay? The rule requires the vent must be provided for a bulk tank, for the bulk acid tank. It has to vent to outside. It must terminate above the grade, and the vent must be away from any air intake or contaminations. Now let's look at the saturator facilities. Even though a saturator facility don't deal with acid vapor, to avoid getting into an airlock situation and to have a smooth operation, we recommend having a tank vent for the saturator's solution tank. Let's also talk about vent sizing. The tank vent should be sized based on the solution refill rate. So you have to look at your inlet pipe coming into your tank. If the inlet pipe is filling the chemical at a high loading rate, the vent pipe of the solution tank should not be a very small tubing. Also, the vent pipe should go upward toward the ceiling or upper part of the wall, so there's no acid vapor accumulation in the operating area. The regulation also said if there's a risk of overflow from bulk tank to the day tank, we require separate vents for the bulk tank and the day tank. And this is a corresponding survey question about that requirement. Transfer pump. We recommend that you have a manually operated spring-loaded switch. Okay, in this picture, you can see the operator has to physically press that button in order to activate the transfer pump. Be aware if you no longer have a physical button and you can remotely control the transfer pump. Be aware whether there is any possibilities of overflowing your day tank. Also, if your operational practice that would defeat the design. For example, instead of physically standing there, if you use a duct tape and a broomstick to do the job instead of your finger, you are defeating the original intent of the design. Poll question, Nicole?
All right, we're going to launch this one here. And how does your facility transfer the fluoride chemical from the bulk tank to the day tank? Do you A, manually operate physical switch? Do you B, is it controlled by an electronic panel inside the facility? Or is it C, remotely controlled by SCADA? Or D, no transfer pump, so no bulk tank? So guys, jump in here real quickly and either answer the poll question or put it in the chat. How does your facility transfer the fluoride chemical from the bulk tank to the day tank? Do you A, manually operate physical switch? B, is it controlled by an electronic panel inside your fluoride facility? Is it remote controlled by SCADA? Or no transfer pump, so no bulk tank? And we have most of you who have voted here. And so we are going to close it on up and share the results. And Yinging, 47% said they manually operate the physical switch. 3% says it's controlled by an electronic panel inside the facility. 50% said that it is controlled by SCADA.
Interesting. All right. Emergency shut-off and location. Lessons learned. If your facility has a transfer pump to transfer the acid to the day tank, and if the transfer pump happens to fail, do you have a way to stop the acid from the bulk tank to the day tank? We asked this question as an informational item during the sanitary survey. The intent is to get the operator to think of this situation, okay? And it had happened in a couple of the facilities that I know of. So we just want to ask this question and get the operator to think ahead of time. Okay, if you do have an emergency shut-off, can the water operator access the emergency shut-off safely? We ask this question. If your emergency shut-off is located in a place that's behind the bulk tank, you have to get around the bulk tank to access it. Not a good design. In this photo, you see this red dot round button, that's the emergency shut-off. It's located right at the entrance of the facility, a very safe place for operator to get to, okay? For catastrophic failure of acid bulk tank, we ask the question, do you have secondary containment or sump in place? Is a containment sized to contain the maximum volume of the solution that needs to be handled? Is a containment surface area acid resistant? If you do use a leak detection probe, do you regularly check it or to make sure it's functioning? Do you have a standard operating procedure in place for catastrophic failure of the acid bulk tank? And are all your operators trained and familiar with the SOP that's put in place? Seismic protection. If you have a large size acid storage tank, you should consider install anchor or seismic cable to restrain it. Considering the recent earthquake we have, this is an informational item in the sanitary survey question, but you should look at all your facilities and, if needed, install a seismic restraint system for your bulk tank. Lessons learned, and this is a painful lesson that we learned, okay? Check fluoride control and SCADA. Water system operators should check fluoride level and SCADA settings after, if you have a power outage, if you had a SCADA repair or maintenance work done, if you have equipment repair or maintenance, electrical work done, or if you have outside contractors that had worked in your fluoride facilities. And we ask this question, and here is a question with a double asterisk. After the recent electrical SCADA work, have you verified that the current settings and the power source of the fluoride feed pump are set up correctly? Okay. What do you check? Examples, you can check high and low fluoride level settings in your SCADA. Check your power source status, whether any changes is made to the electrical outlet. Check your power phase monitor status. Check your dial position. And I'll give you an example. Here is a picture of the 2 fluoride pump. And this is a dial position that controls the feed pump. And usually it has 3 options: auto, off, and hand position. So the normal operation is auto. If you're not going to use this fluoride feed pump, you turn it to off. The hand position means the pump is running. It's usually for testing purpose. And so in this facility, they have a physical dial on site. If your facility does not have a physical dial, instead has a touch screen panel, I highly recommend you implement an SOP that requires the water operators to always verify the dial position using the touch screen before leaving the fluoridation facility. Question, do you have an SOP in place? Okay, if you have any programming done or any remote access allowed to control the power source and fluoride feed pump, be aware and be very cautious when you modify the SCADA or PLC programming. Make sure you allow the remote access that would not defeat intent of the original design. That means you will only inject fluoride when the water is flowing in the pipe. Okay. Poll question?
Yes, I'm going to launch that right now. Oh, wait, is this the correct one? To minimize the risk of fluoride feed in public drinking water?
No.
Oh, I apologize.
It's a poll question, ask whether they have a SOP to check fluoride control and SCADA setting after repair and maintenance work.
Oh.
2 options, yes or no.
I apologize. I must not have put that one in. I apologize, Ying Ying.
That, you know what, that's okay. We'll just move on because the purpose is to bring awareness to the water operator. So it's okay if we don't have a feedback on that. Fluoride saturator, the regulation require the makeup water to be softened to the hardness less than 75 milligram per liter and have a sediment filter on the makeup water line. And this is the softener. And we have the question for saturator facilities. Entering fluoridation facilities, and if there's a control room, enter the control room first. Turn on the light and fan switch. Check the readout panels and make sure it's safe. Observe through the view window and enter the fluoride operating area with caution. So here's a picture. You see 2 doors, and which door do you enter first? And I would say look up the roof. You can tell the door on the right is for asset storage and operating area. So enter from the left door first. Okay. Water system response to fluoride overfeed incident. Make sure you know your system configuration. For example, if you need to flush, and this is a picture taken in Sandy City, and the Sandy City operator is flushing, the high fluoride water out of the distribution system. You also need to know the chemical. Know what kind of chemical you're dealing with. Okay. If you overfeed fluoride, watch for the fluoride health effect, the primary and secondary MCL. Doesn't matter whether it's acid or not. The saturator facility, you also have MCL issues, okay? Specifically related to acid, be aware of the low pH impact on your piping. You have lead and copper, other metals, turbidity and corrosion problem on the piping. So you not only need to deal with the distribution system piping that you need to flush the fluoride out of it, be aware of the premise plumbing piping beyond the service meters. inside the homes. Here's a picture taken by a Sandy City resident. And this person was posted on Facebook, say, hey, does anyone know why is the water look green in my toilet bowl? The water color is green because there's a high level of copper content. Copper ion is green-blue color. It's a leaching of the lead and copper out of the metal pipe. You can see the low pH impact here. Let's look at the water system response to fluoride overfeed. Do you have a standard operating procedure in place? The standard operating procedure should cover, do you have a communication and coordination protocol? Do you clearly define roles and responsibilities? Who does what? Have you assembled a team and the team has been trained? And the team should include operators, lab staff, office staff, and management. What is your immediate operational response? Who will go shut off the valve and flush? Who will go to the field to take the samples? And who will be responsible? Track the timeline and document. Here's an example from Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City had an incident, and this is the document they kindly shared with the Division of Drinking Water to document on what date and time the action taken by the water system response team. And your operator will need to know what to sample and monitor in the field. Exactly what do they need to monitor? Do not just take a back T samples. Know what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with low pH chemical, make sure they also sample for pH in the field. Know what samples you need to send to the laboratories. And which laboratory do you send to? What if the event happens on Friday at 4:30 in the afternoon? And which lab is open? And also be careful about the turnaround time. Do you send the sample? And if you need to expedite it, let the lab know. The lab gladly help you to expedite the analysis, especially if there's an acute public health risk involved. Here's an example of Salt Lake City's summary of the field and lab sample results. On the left, the first column, you'll see all the location of the sampling site. On the top, this row identifies all the parameters they sampled. Okay, last poll question before we get to the quiz question. Does your water system have standard operating procedure in place for handling fluoride overfeed? Yes or no?
Ooh, I'm sorry, that was the wrong one. I did the acid spill one, so I apologize.
That's okay. If we are running short of time, we don't have to wait for the response.
Okay.
It's just to bring awareness. We are about out of time. I have 4 slides for the quiz questions, but Nicole, should I just hand it over to you if you have those quiz questions?
I do have them. I was just going to launch them right now.
Okay.
The first one was how does your facility, or was it the first one, Ying Ying, was, sorry. Yeah, it was to minimize the risk of fluoride overfeed in public drinking water supply. The most important design feature is having a secondary containment to minimize spills, having a secondary control that provides dosing controls, being unplugged when fluoridation facility is not in use, or all of the above. So if you guys wouldn't mind jumping in here and voting. And I think we only have 3 questions because I wasn't able to get all that last question in because of the character limit, Jing Ying. So we only have 3 test or kind of quiz questions for them to participate in. So if you guys wouldn't mind jumping in, this is one of 3. Again, to minimize the risk of fluoride overfeed in public drinking water supply, the most important design feature is having a secondary containment and minimizing spills, having a secondary control that provides dosing controls, being unplugged when the fluoridation facility is not in use, or D, all of the above. And we have about 75, 80% of you who have voted, so I'm going to close it on up and share the results with you guys. And 19% said having a secondary control that provides dosing controls. 6% said being unplugged when fluoridation facility is not in use. And 75% said all of the above, which is good. And Ying isn't the correct answer all of the above, though?
I think we have two questions mixed together.
Oh, I apologize.
That's all right. I wonder if that's the case, Nicole, would be helpful if you let me present these questions and we don't get the feedback, and that's fine. It's just
That's
people
perfect.
get, you know, I have these slides, so.
Then why don't you just continue and go ahead if you, and I will not
Okay.
release the questions.
All right, so is everybody seeing my screen now?
They are still seeing your screen.
Okay, for the first quiz question, remember, the purpose is to minimize fluoride overfeed in the water. And among these four questions, Nicole, would it work if they just use a chat box?
They can. You guys can just put it into the chat what you guys guess your answer is.
Among the A, B, C, D, which one do you think is the most important feature to minimize fluoride overfeed in the drinking water supply?
And so far, most of them have said B, Ying Ying.
Correct answer. Okay, quiz question number 2. The power source for a fluoride feed pump should A, be a non-standard receptacle type of electrical outlet. B, interconnect with a well pump or surface pump, so the fluoride feed pump is turned on only when the well pump or surface pump is running. C, be unplugged when the fluoridation facility is not in use for an extended period of time. D, all of the above. Please enter your answer in the chat box.
Yes, I see where I got confused, and I apologize. And they are all answering D for this one.
Great. Okay, quiz question number 3. After electrical SCADA maintenance or repair work has been done in a fluoridation facility, what can you do to minimize fluoride overfeed? A, confirm that the dial position is set correctly inside the station. B, check whether the recent work affected the fluoride control settings in SCADA. C, verify that recent work does not alter the original power supply design, which is intended to only add fluoride when the water is active flowing in the pipe. D, all of the above.
All right, guys, go ahead and type those in, your answers real quick. And I'm getting a whole bunch of D's here again, Ying Ying, all of the above for this answer.
Super. All right, the last quiz question. Which statement below is correct? A, the Utah Division Drinking Water mandates adding fluoride to the public water system. B, the optimal fluoride level in drinking water is determined by the local health departments, and it is currently set at 1.2 ppm. C, the Division Drinking Water does not mandate adding fluoride to public drinking water, but does have design and construction standards if a water system wants to install a fluoridation facility. D, flushing the high fluoride water out of this distribution piping operated by a water system is adequate when responding to a fluoride overfeed incident.
This one was her hard one, you guys. All the other ones I thought were a little, not easy, but this one I thought she kind of might have tricked you on, because we have them all over the board for answers on this one, Ying Ying. We've got some A's, some B's, some C's, and some D's on this one.
I think everybody's blood sugar is getting low. Okay, I will tell you the correct answer is A, okay? I'm sorry, the correct answer is C. A is not correct. The Division Drinking Water does not require adding fluoride to the water. And B, the answer is wrong because the current optimal level is 0.7 ppm, not 1.2. C is the correct answer. D is the trick question, a trick answer. It's wrong because there was a slide I mentioned that when you deal with fluoride overfeed, you have also to deal with the premise plumbing. It's not just a distribution piping. You have to reach beyond your service meters and reach out to your customers, ask them to flush in their houses. I think that's all I have. Sorry about running over time.
No, you are fine. Do you mind real quickly reiterating again what those blue on your slides, because I do have your presentation available in the handouts again, and I thought it was very great how you included the sanitary survey questions on your slides. Can you just reiterate how those were kind of in blue on your slides again for those who kind of missed it? What the blue questions were and what the asterisks were by those blue questions so that they can kind of pay attention to that.
Okay, happy to do that. Throughout my presentations, you will see questions inside the blue boxes. Those questions are sanitary survey inspection questions. The inspectors will ask you these questions, and these questions are grouped into 4 groups. The first group is a general question that applies to all fluoridation facility types. Okay, and the second group is an acid facility questions. The third group is saturator facility questions. And the fourth group is the dry feeder questions, and you probably don't get that. And in my presentation, I put the red stars behind some of the questions. If a question does not have any red asterisks in the end, means it's an informational question and you don't get deficiency points with it. If you get 1 asterisk with it, means you will get significant deficiency with it if your answer is non-compliant. And some of the questions has 2 asterisks. That means not only do you get a significant deficiencies, you actually get a lot of points, deficiency points with it. So those are the questions you want to be careful. So the sanitary survey season is about to start. So I encourage you to review these inspection questions and walk through your facilities and be prepared for the sanitary survey inspections.